Have you ever asked yourself why conservative thinking is considered realistic? This question may seem simple on the surface, but it's a gateway into a much broader conversation about ideologies and how they shape our world. Conservative thinking at its core is about maintaining order and stability. It's about preserving the traditions and values that have stood the test of time. But it's more than just a preference for the status quo. Conservative thinking is deeply rooted in observation, induction, and experience, the three pillars that make it a practical and realistic ideology. Observation is a key aspect of conservative thinking. It involves looking at the world, seeing how things work, and drawing conclusions based on what is observed. This is not about making assumptions or relying on abstract theories. It's about grounding one's perspective in the realities of life. Then there is induction, the process of reasoning from specific instances to general theories. In the context of conservative thinking, this means learning from past experiences and applying those lessons to future situations. It's about seeing patterns and trends, understanding the causes and effects, and making practical decisions based on that understanding. Lastly, conservative thinking is shaped by experience. This is perhaps the most important aspect, as it adds a layer of wisdom and pragmatism to the ideology. Experience brings perspective, understanding, and a sense of realism. It allows conservatives to navigate the complexities of life with a clear and grounded vision. Of course, conservative thinking is not the only ideology out there. There are others, such as liberal thinking and socialist thinking, each with its own set of principles and beliefs. We'll delve into these comparisons in the later scenes, but for now, it's important to understand that conservative thinking, with its focus on observation, induction, and experience, offers a realistic and pragmatic approach to understanding and navigating the world. Now that we understand what conservative thinking is, we can delve deeper into its realism. To understand conservative thinking's realism, consider its contrast with liberal thinking. Let's delve into the world of ideologies, where conservative thinking often stands in stark contrast to liberal thinking. These two philosophies, in essence, represent different perspectives on society, governance, and human nature. Liberal thinking in general is more idealistic. It espouses the belief in the inherent goodness of humanity and the potential for societal progress. Liberals often prioritize ideas like equality, social justice, and the potential for change. They tend to favor policies that promote these ideals, even if these policies may seem radical or untested. The liberal philosophy is often rooted in theory, in the world as it could be, rather than the world as it is. On the other side of the spectrum, we have conservative thinking. If liberal thinking is the dreamer, then conservative thinking is the realist. Conservatism is grounded in the real world. It's based on what can be observed, induced, and experienced. It values tradition and stability, viewing change with caution and skepticism. While liberals might look to create a utopia, conservatives are more focused on preserving what works and cautiously improving what doesn't. They are less likely to take a leap of faith on unproven ideas, preferring instead to rely on tried and tested methods. They believe in the importance of individual responsibility and the power of market forces, as these are principles that have proven effective over time. It's important to note that both conservative and liberal thinking have their strengths and weaknesses. They offer different perspectives and solutions to societal issues. The key is to understand that these philosophies are not inherently good or bad. They simply represent different ways of viewing and interacting with the world. In the end, conservative thinking's realism doesn't mean it's devoid of ideals or aspirations. It simply means that its approach is more practical, grounded in what has been observed and experienced in the real world. As we can see, conservative thinking's realism comes from its practical and experience-based nature. Scene script. Another ideology that contrasts with conservative thinking is socialist thinking. Let's delve into a comparison of these two ideologies, to better understand how they differ from each other. Socialist thinking, in its essence, is grounded in the belief of communal ownership. It advocates for the equal distribution of resources among all members of society. This ideology is often seen as idealistic, as it imagines a world where wealth disparities are eradicated, and everyone shares in society's prosperity. It's a vision of the world that appeals to a sense of fairness and equality. However, this ideology can also be seen as theoretical, since it often struggles to implement these principles in a practical, real-world setting. There's an inherent tension in socialist thinking. It's a constant balancing act between the ideals of equality and the pragmatic realities of human nature and economic forces. This tension can sometimes lead to inefficiencies and a lack of motivation within the society. On the other hand, conservative thinking is rooted in the appreciation for individual ownership and free markets. It values the idea that hard work and innovation should be rewarded and that competition can lead to growth and prosperity. This ideology is often seen as realistic, as it is based on observation, induction, and real-world experience. For instance, conservative thinking recognizes that some level of inequality is a natural outcome of human diversity and competition. It also acknowledges the role of market forces and individual decisions in shaping the economic landscape. These elements of conservative thinking are grounded in real-world scenarios, making it more pragmatic and less theoretical. So, while socialist thinking aims for a utopian vision of equality, conservative thinking tends to focus on the practical realities of the world. It values the lessons learned from past experiences and seeks to apply them in shaping policies and decisions. Thus, conservative thinking's realism becomes more evident when compared to socialist thinking. Its focus on individual freedom, free markets, and real-world experiences sets it apart from the more idealistic visions of socialism. Each ideology has its merits, but it's important to understand the practical implications of each and how they can shape society in different ways. Having compared conservative thinking with other ideologies, we can now focus on why it is considered realistic. Conservative thinking, at its core, is a philosophy that values tradition, stability, and the lessons of the past. It is the embodiment of realism in political and social thinking. Why? Because it is based on observation, induction, and experience. It doesn't merely rely on abstract theories or ideals, but looks back at what has been proven to work throughout history. Conservative thinking chooses to stand on the shoulders of giants, learning from the wisdom and experience of those who came before. It is a philosophy that recognizes the value of continuity, the importance of the lessons learned from the past, and the need to apply those lessons to the present and the future. One of the key aspects that lends realism to conservative thinking is its reliance on historical precedents. It looks at the past to understand the present and to predict the future. It doesn't take a leap of faith into the unknown, but rather, it walks on the well-trodden path of tried and tested policies and principles. It's a perspective that favors the tangible, the concrete, the real over the abstract. Empirical evidence is another cornerstone of the realism in conservative thinking. It holds that we should base our decisions and actions on what we can observe, measure, and verify. It rejects the notion of making decisions based purely on ideology or wishful thinking. Instead, it values practical solutions that have been proven to work in the real world. Moreover, conservative thinking values tradition and stability. These are aspects that have stood the test of time, that have proven their worth in maintaining social order and fostering progress. Tradition and stability are not just valued for their own sake, but because they provide a sense of continuity, a connection to the past, and a guide for the future. In conclusion, conservative thinking is realistic because it is grounded in the lessons of the past, empirical evidence, and the value of tradition and stability. It is a philosophy that takes a pragmatic, evidence-based approach to decision-making. The realism of conservative thinking lies in its grounding in lived experiences and historical precedents. In conclusion, conservative thinking's realism is clear when we delve into its principles and compare it with other ideologies. Let's take a step back and reflect on the journey we've traversed. We started by understanding the essence of conservative thinking. It's a philosophy grounded in the belief that tradition, order, and individual freedom are fundamental to a functioning society. The tenets of conservatism are not drawn from thin air, they are based on observation, induction, and experience. We then moved on to analyze conservative thinking in contrast with liberal thinking. While liberalism often emphasizes progress and reform, it sometimes overlooks the wisdom of the past. On the other hand, conservatism acknowledges that change is inevitable but stresses the importance of learning from history. It champions the idea of gradual evolution over radical revolution, making it a more realistic and stable ideology. Next, we juxtaposed conservative thinking with socialist thinking. The key difference here lies in the approach to wealth and resources. Socialism advocates for collective ownership and equal distribution, which in theory sounds ideal. However, it often fails to recognize the complexities of human nature and the diversity of individual abilities and aspirations. In contrast, conservatism, with its emphasis on free markets and individual liberty, acknowledges these realities, making it a more pragmatic ideology. Lastly, we delved into the realism of conservative thinking. It doesn't promise utopia, instead it deals with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. It believes in the imperfectibility of human nature, and accepts the existence of societal hierarchies as a natural outcome of individual differences. This realism makes conservative thinking a practical and enduring ideology. Reflecting on all this, we can see the robust realism that underpins conservative thinking. Its principles are drawn from real-life observations and experiences, and its approach to societal issues is grounded in practicality and pragmatism. Therefore, it is no surprise that conservative thinking, with its realism, continues to be a significant force in the world of ideologies.